Welcome to another episode of The Monk and the Hedonist. Today we have a very special guest, Moly Schreiber. And before I go into introductions, as our usual Monk and Hedonist tradition, I'm going to do a toast. Deepthi, I am drinking a Chardonnay. What are you drinking over there in Chicago?
Well, that sounds fun. I'm actually drinking some chamomile tea as I am sort of getting ready to wind down the night.
The monk as usual. And
Yes.
Moly, Moly, what are you drinking over here in Dubuque?
I didn't know that I could choose monk. I thought I had to choose the opposite. So I'm drinking sugar-free white wine.
Sugar-free. So how does that taste?
It's delicious.
Wow.
Where do you get that? Where do you get sugar-free? How are they sourcing that?
Am I doing a commercial here? For Dry Farms Wine online. So now that I've said it, it'll probably show up everywhere for you.
Yeah.
Well, that's great.
Look it up.
Well, Moly, I'm really excited to have you on the show today. For everyone that is new to Moly, she's one of my favorite people. Moly is what I would call a spiritual alchemist because she has found a way to make pain into strength and power. For Moly, that power comes in the form of yoga. And she is bringing yoga into schools for children throughout Iowa, Illinois, and Wisconsin. She is the founder of Challenge to Change, which is an organization that does that. She also started the nonprofit Mindful Minutes, and she is coming out with a book now called Grow. So we have a lot to talk about, and I'm excited to get going. So Moly, tell us a little bit about your background. How did someone from Iowa get so into yoga?
Right? That's a really good question. Someone from Iowa. How did I get so into yoga? Well, I found the practice of yoga. I like to say the practice of yoga is a big part of my healing process. I was a young school teacher and had young children and was married to a fantastic man who was also a school teacher. And through some twists and turns in life, became a single widow of 3 young children. So my husband was killed in a car accident. And at the age of 30, I was widowed with 3 kids under the age of 3. And at that time, I really had to make some changes and make them quickly and fast. And I moved my children back to Dubuque because that was my hometown. And when I came back to Dubuque, I really founded myself in the practice of yoga. There was yoga in my town I was living in previously and had discovered it as a young mom as a place for me to just kind of reconnect with myself. But I never really understood the full power of it until it became a big part of my grieving and healing process. It was also at that time that I had stepped out of education. I had stepped out of teaching and stayed home with my children. And through my grieving process, I realized that yoga is also the missing link in education. That 2 years that I stepped out of teaching, I realized that life had picked up very quickly. During those 2 years, I got my first text messages. Smartphones became something that everybody had at all times, and everything was at their disposal. And I saw that children's anxiety was picking up as well as adults, and the kids pick up on everything the adults do and need and say. And so I realized we have to do something. We have to change something in the world of education. And so that's when I took my first yoga teacher training and decided kids need this. And so I stepped back and put together a curriculum that would help children understand, first of all, what the practice of mindfulness is, and then how to implement it into their daily lives and how to use them as tools, as lifelong tools.
Moly, that's such a powerful story. Thank you for sharing that. I think it would be really helpful if you explain a little bit more about how yoga helped you through your grieving process, because I think, when we think about yoga to the average person, it's, yoga is about flexibility and it's about getting a workout. But actually, yoga in its purest form is really to help you move through life. That was why it was designed millennia ago. And so I always find it really fascinating to hear people's journeys when they start doing yoga and how it helps them with life in general. So can you talk a little bit more about where that transition and transformation came in?
That's such a good point, because when I first started practicing it before my husband passed away, it was all about how I could touch my toes. And it was another workout class that I could do. And then when I went back to it after my husband died, I started to really scratch the surface beyond like touching your toes and knowing that, oh, I like how this breath feels in my body, and realized that it's a way of life, and came to understand that life is about suffering. And, yoga is a pathway to help us through that. It's all about the yamas and the niyamas. It's about how we treat ourselves and how we treat others. There's 8 parts of practice, and asana is one of them. And so for me, it was coming to fully understand the philosophy of it and really getting in touch with myself, because all the answers are really lying within you. And that's where the true core of happiness is. And if I was going to reach my noble goal in life, which was to raise happy, healthy, safe kids, I was widowed with a 3-year-old and 2 15-year-old twins. And so I knew that if I was going to raise happy, healthy, safe kids, I was going to have a happy, healthy, safe mama. And yoga became a big way for me to come into touch with who I wanted to be at the true core of my being.
That's incredible. And Moly, I think I first met you because my daughter was in one of your classes. How did you know, or when did you first know that yoga had this kind of impact on your own children? Did you notice that it brought them resilience in some way?
That's a really good question that nobody's ever asked me, Bobby. Thank you for asking that. So when my husband passed away and I moved back to Dubuque, Pam Connolly, who's a very good friend of mine, was teaching a kids yoga class like it was a one-time thing at Body and Soul. And I took Maggie, my daughter, so she was the 3-year-old at that time. The twins were still very young, but we had just moved back to Dubuque. And I loved yoga and I wanted Maggie to experience it. And she did a little lesson it was in the fall, and my husband passed away in May, and she did the lesson in October. And it was a lesson about leaves and about how the cycle of life happens with leaves. And wow, Bobby, I just can't believe you asked me that question. And so it was in that moment, I have shivers. Thank you for asking that. That I knew that this was really a true calling that needed to happen, because it was all about the cycle of life. And I had been talking to my children about that and reading all the children's books you were supposed to read to your children after, their parent passed away, and trying to do all the right things. And then it just landed in my lap. So that was one of the moments. And those are like, I like to call those moments of samadhi, or those moments of bliss, those moments where it's like, okay, this is where I need to go. This is my road.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And for parents who are thinking about introducing their kids into yoga, or parents who have maybe slowly dabbled their kids into yoga, I think one thing that's overlooked is that this is something that is a journey. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So it probably takes time to really notice the major benefits of a practice like yoga and mindfulness on children, right? Did you have any idea as to how long it took before you noticed it in your kids?
So in my kids personally, they see it as something that their mama does, and they follow the way of life. They have it in dance now. I mean, it's everywhere they go. But I'd love to give 2 examples of some of the young yogis I've been working with for about 7 years now. They started taking kids yoga classes with me about 7 years ago. And now they are 8th graders, and they are actually enrolled in our 200 yoga teacher training. And so they are now going to be teaching adults. And it's really amazing. Like you said, it's not the sprint, it's a marathon. Just watching them year after year, embrace the practices and then become young junior teachers in our advanced kids yoga classes, listening to them learn how to teach in Sanskrit. And then now they're in, now they're the lead teachers, and they're going to teach adults. So today their lesson was on Ayurveda, and their minds were just like blown open, learning about that whole aspect. And so it's just really amazing to see how kids evolve and with the practice, and just how kind and compassionate they are. A couple of the adults who were in the training said today, gosh, I just wish that all kids would have this from the age that Grace and Brennan, who are the two that are in the class, from the age that they had it, because they both started in first grade and now they're eighth graders, and they've been living these practices every day of their life.
That's so fascinating. How are the adults, what's the reception from the adults to have these kids teach them? What's the reception of yoga? What interested them in it? Because, it's something that some people are really gravitate towards, and it's to others, it's like, oh, that's not for me. I don't do that.
That's a really good question. So when I went into adding yoga, believing that yoga and mindfulness needed to be part of the regular rigor of the school day, was because I saw that missing link, that piece that the kiddos weren't getting. And I really wanted that to become a foundational piece, that the kids would get tools to self-regulate. And now, fast forward, 10 years in the world of education, it's called social emotional learning. So they're now putting a term to yoga and mindfulness and self-regulation, but it's called social emotional learning. And it's a big buzzword in education right now. And it's what we strive to help implement. And, the adults are like, wow, if we only would have had these tools when we were younger. And they look back and they see these little wise individuals, and it gives them hope for the world, hope for the future, that there are going to be leaders that lead with kindness and compassion and have these morals and values that I can't say every future person will have, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does make sense. And as you talk about self-regulation, Moly, and just inner strength and emotional intelligence, obviously these are such important, critical qualities and traits to have as we grow older. And, honestly, even for adults, it's important for us to continue to cultivate those skills. Do you have any specific examples as to where you saw that playing out with kids? Whether they're coming from a troubled background or even someone who has done well traditionally, but maybe it enhanced their performance even further?
So many. The most recent one that was brought to my attention this morning, I'll give you. So Challenge to Change offers yoga and mindfulness in the schools, but we also offer it in many different venues. And one of them are juvenile detention centers and shelters. That's become a big part of our passion, is yoga for resiliency. And so we have been offering for about almost a year now, yoga at a juvenile detention center, specifically in Lynn County in Iowa. And there has been an individual that has been at this juvenile detention center for quite some time. And we do weekly yoga practices there. And it's taken time to form a bond with these students and to build trust. And we were doing a tour at a shelter this last week in a different county in Iowa, but it was the home county of this young boy who had been at the juvenile detention center. And he looked over and saw us, and he was like, oh my gosh, you are the yoga ladies. You are the ladies who bring, that yoga into the detention center where I was. And he's like, I loved that. That was so great. And look at me. Now I'm in the shelter. I can, I'm making one more step towards, being outside again. But it was a great story to see the building blocks and how the practices have made a difference in his life. And he's taken those tools forward into the next stage in his life, which at that point happens to be in a shelter.
Molly, you're doing such important work. Like this is so important, and I've always thought, like, what if kids start learning yoga? What will the world be like 20 years from now? What what have been some of your, if you could recount one or two experiences, what are some of your favorite transformational stories that you've seen within children who have picked up yoga?
You're like asking my most favorite question. I could geek out all day talking about this. Some of my,
I mean, I love hearing these kinds of stories. I think they're just so fascinating.
some of my most favorite stories. So we've done a study with our curriculum, and we based it on on socioeconomic standing. And our very first year of the study, it's a 3-year study that we've done, and we have controlled schools, but in one of our lowest socioeconomic schools that we went into, to watch the transformation of this 5th grade classroom, where the first time we went in, where they were looking at us like, who are you crazy ladies, thinking you're going to come in and tell me how to act and how I'm supposed to sit and how I'm supposed to move my body. Who do you think you are? To the final lesson in May before we left, where there were hugs and cards. And this summer, when I practice my yoga, I'm going to make sure that I say this mantra all the time because it makes me feel better in my head. So that's probably one of the most rewarding stories, was that first year that we implemented into schools, and to see the change in this one 5th grade classroom from year one to to the end of, or from day one until May. It was fabulous. You want another one? Because I could go on and on and on, but I know your listeners don't want to keep listening. So currently we are in 217 schools in and around the state of Iowa, but we also have schools in Pennsylvania, and we have a couple in Spain. We are expanding outside of our tri-state area, which is Wisconsin, Illinois, and Iowa. But currently 217 schools, and we serve roughly around 32 schools live, but we stretch out further with our online programming. We serve pre-K students all the way up through high school students. We also offer adult programming. We have a physical yoga studio in Dubuque, but anymore, we've learned through the pandemic, nothing has to be a bricks and mortar. So we have a real online presence as well. The biggest part of what we do is the programming for schools, but we do also offer them like in detention centers and shelters and anywhere else where children need the service and practice of yoga. So I really keep trying to stay under the number of 50 as a small business. So right now we're at 45, and we have 45 part-time / full-time employees that teach for us, whether it's a continuing education class for educators or a yoga teacher training or a teacher in school. But there's 45. Well, actually, there's 44 women and 1 man. We have a man now, Bobby, on our team. So I can't say it's all women now. Yeah.
How did you get involved in Spain? So you like started in the Midwest and jumped over to Spain.
So one of our yoga schools last year is a dual language school. Actually, it's a school Nisha goes to, Bobby's daughter. And one of the teachers took our children's yoga teacher training, which is called a 95-hour yoga teacher training. And she moved back to Spain, and she texted us and said, I really, really want this program at my school now that I've moved back to Spain. So we said, okay, let's do it. So she's starting to spread it to other schools in Spain. And it's really great to get video of them singing their songs and doing their yoga poses. And so monthly she sends us an update on how they're doing. But they're one of our virtual schools.
How does the class look like, Molly, to someone who is interested in, if someone wanted to have their kid take a class in Challenge to Change, what would be the typical class?
So if it was a studio class, it would be about an hour long. If it was in schools, we run our school programming about a half an hour session. If it was, whether it's in schools or it's in studio, we do parts of practice. So I'm a teacher at heart. So I break down into curricular parts of the lesson. If you're in studio, you do 7 parts of practice. And if you're in schools, you do 5 parts of practice. And the parts of practice always start with breathing. And then it's movement, which is sun salutation. Then comes the heart of the lesson, which is the concept we're getting across, which might be yoga poses, or it may be centered around a piece of literature. It might be centered around learning your dosha. It depends on whether it's in school or in the studio. And then comes the creative connection, which is how we reinforce the concept that's being taught through a creative venue, where maybe it's painting, or maybe it's making a mind jar, or it's usually brought forth through a creative venture. And then we have something we call the yoga nap, which is where a yoga story is read to them. So it's a guided meditation time. And then the close of practice, which is where we bring forth a mantra for them to take home. And it has to be their favorite mantra is Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavatu, which is may I be happy, pretty much. May you be happy. May we all be happy together. So those are the parts of practice that are experienced within that hour. And it's the same structure every time, but they change up with the lesson that's being brought forth.
Yeah, and when you mention some of these mantras and yoga poses, Deepthi and I kind of grew up with that in our household from our parents. So hearing you say that you're bringing those same mantras into schools in Iowa, it's incredible, first of all. But I'm sure that there was probably some resistance. How did you overcome those barriers and be able to expand the way you did?
So first of all, Dubuque's a very Catholic town. I know that you are aware of that as well, but part of the reason, I think, is because I grew up a practicing Catholic and many people knew me, so the trust was there. And the understanding and the education that it doesn't have to be religiously bound. And that when you try to bind it to a religion, usually that's done out of fear. I mean, it's all fear-based. What's going to be taken away from me? What's going to be taken away from my kids? So we really front-loaded with a lot of education on what it is and what it isn't. Part of what we've taken out of the practices, though, is saying anything in Sanskrit. That just seems to even the playing field for some families. So instead, at the end, we don't say namaste. We bring our hands to heart center and we say peace.
Yeah, that seems like a reasonable compromise. And honestly, it's so much more than just the words, right? It's the whole process of what you're bringing that really is powerful. So kudos to you for being able to really overcome those barriers.
Yeah, I've never been one that's completely followed the rules. So,
Molly, do you ever find that by virtue of teaching children that their parents get inspired to start yoga?
Oh, yes. That seems to be the way that's a really good statement, because you could just stop there and I would just say yes. That does happen. Like, parents will sign up for trainings because they want to learn more, because their kids come home and teach them.
Right. That's what I'm always hoping will happen to my friends, that their kids will start learning yoga in school and it will inspire them to start yoga.
Do you have yoga in your schools in Chicago?
I don't know. I feel like it's very hit or miss. Like, people are starting to, or I should say children are starting to have mindfulness minutes, which when we were growing up, we never had that. So I know the awareness is there. I think with Peloton becoming more popular at home, there's meditation on that. There's like a family meditation time. So I know a lot of people will engage in that together. And I think whatever can get people at least started, because it's baby steps like we talked about. And it's just sort of that, it's a journey. It's like questioning that journey, or why does this make me feel good? Or, the micro changes that you feel, like you stated at the beginning. So I think it's starting. But what you're talking about is really fascinating, and it would be amazing if you could even infiltrate it into Chicago.
We'd love to. We'd love to.
Molly, if you don't mind, I would love to talk about your nonprofit now. And I'm proud to be a board member on that as well. But if we can talk about Mindful Minutes, that would be great.
We are so proud to have you as a board member, Bobby. So Mindful Minutes for Schools was birthed because Challenge to Change is a for-profit, and a lot of the work that I put into Challenge to Change were my books. So I've written several children's books, produced many different yoga decks and curriculum pieces that go with a lot of the classes that we teach to adults, and then also the curriculum that we deliver to kids. But I felt like we were missing a portion of students. So in our study, we covered, lower socioeconomic schools and higher socioeconomic schools. But when we were bringing kids to studio, when we were serving schools, a lot of the answers that we were getting was, we just can't afford it. And I was finding that we were having the same sort of ethnicity coming into the studio, and the same sort of socioeconomic standing parents coming into the studio, and the same with schools. But I wanted to hit all learners, no matter what their race, religion, ethnic beliefs were. I wanted to hit all students. And so in the formation of Mindful Minutes for Schools, we were able to do that, because now we can write grants, we can raise money, and the answer can never be, we can't afford it. The answer is, I think we have another way that we can help you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And what's your ultimate goal with that, with Mindful Minutes? Where do you want to go with that?
Oh, goodness, Bobby. So we're bringing someone on full time this year, because we have grown so much at Challenge to Change over the pandemic. And I believe we're only going to grow tremendously over the next few years as brain health becomes more of a need in all schools, and and social emotional learning becomes something that's needed in all schools. And it's something that's going to be mandated that they bring in their curriculum. So I know Challenge to Change is going to continue to grow, but I cannot give up Mindful Minutes and the mission that it brings to leverage the community resources so all students can learn to practice mindfulness and yoga and have those tools, those lifelong tools. So we've hired somebody full time to carry out that mission for me. I'll still work side by side with her and with the board, but I want to have someone that can be a duplication of me and continue to write the grants and do the work. But the goal for me, Bobby, the longevity piece that I see, is bringing it and making it bigger than just Dubuque community, to bring it to all of Iowa, and then to also make it a national nonprofit standing, so that all students, no matter where Challenge to Change reaches, it could be any other yoga business, but knowing that Mindful Minutes is there to support them. That's my goal. That's why they would say, your big, hairy, audacious goal.
It's a fantastic goal. Yeah. Yep. And the book that's coming out that you wrote, Grow, how does that tie in to everything that you're doing?
Bobby, I think you cut out for just a second there.
All right. Yeah. So I was just saying, the book Grow that's coming out, how does that tie in to everything that you're doing right now?
So Grow is our mission. We teach, the basis of what we teach is to teachers. So we teach them continuing education classes. And for years, I've been using literature from other authors in our continuing education classes. but then using their literature, but saying, but at Challenge to Change, we teach it this way. And this is how we teach mindfulness. And this is how we approach yoga with administration and with staff and with students. But GROW is the basis of our mission. So it's written out in the book. So we use it for our continuing education classes, for all of our trainings. That was the foundation and the reason that we wrote the book. But we're finding it standing on even a bigger platform right now, that parents want it, that everyone in the nation right now is looking for tools and techniques that they can use to help themselves mentally and emotionally through this trying time of the world starting back up again. So GROW is meant to sit there and give you tools on different ways to practice mindfulness and yoga, not only with kids, but with yourself.
Do you mind talking about some of those tools?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So the different ways that we talk about mindfulness, number one is breath work. And any great yoga class that you go to always starts with breath work, right? I mean, that's the foundation of why we have the poses, is so we can focus on our meditation. But some of the breath practices that we teach the kids are as complicated as using mudras. So we use mudras a lot with students, which we tell them are yoga for their fingers. You're going to do yoga for your brain. You're going to do yoga for your heart. You're going to do yoga for your body, but we're going to start with our fingers. So I'm going to have you guys just wiggle your fingers right now. And then I'm going to have you hold up your pointer finger and your center finger. We never say middle finger with kids, you guys. Never say middle finger, right? And so these are what we call your peace fingers. So say peace. Then turn to yourself and say, peace out, I'm going inward. And then you're going to take your peace fingers and you're going to plug them down into the earth. And you're going to sit up nice and smart. And then close your eyes. Plug into the earth is the mudra we're doing right now. And it's an excellent mudra to use when you have the wiggles and jiggles and you struggle to sit still. So sometimes our smart mind doesn't always cooperate and it wants to make our body move. But when we plug into the earth and we breathe, we're connecting that smart mind of ours to our kind heart so we can have that calm body. Let's take 3 of those breaths together. Are you ready? Okay, exhale out.
Yeah.
Now take a big inhale in through your nose. And then exhale through the nose. Take another big inhale in through your nose. And exhale. Let's do it one more time. Big inhale in through your nose. And exhale. And then open your eyes. Give me a big smile. How do you feel? So you
Relax.
Yeah, good.
Grounded.
Grounded, good. That's the purpose of it. Oh, there's so much behind Plug Into the Earth. It's my favorite mudra to use with kids. Mm-hmm. And you know, it's the most common one. In Dubuque, it's not uncommon to run into students and say, "Oh my gosh, Challenge to Change. We love yoga in our classroom. Plug into the earth." So that's like the number one mudra that they use. But starting with the breath practice, we also do brain and heart mindfulness practices, which my favorite one to teach kids is the gratitude rampage. And the gratitude rampage is when you think of things that you're grateful for, and you can do a gratitude rampage with people that are near you. You can do gratitude rampage with people over, on your way walking into Target. But it's where you go back and forth and you say things you're grateful for over and over again with people who are around you. So if I was grateful for the sun, Bobby, you might say, that makes me think that I'm grateful for the flowers that Taylor just planted out back. And then, BT, that might make you think of, oh my gosh, that makes me think of my neighbor who grows beautiful flowers. I'm grateful for Susie, who's my neighbor. So the gratitude rampage is where you say things over and over again that you're grateful for. But the magic in gratitude is what happens to your face, what happens to your body structure, and what happens to your emotions when you talk about things that you love. You can't help but smile. You can't help but change those negative thought patterns. The science is that we have over 50,000 thoughts a day, And 90% of those thoughts are habitual thoughts that we have day after day after day, and 80% of them are negative. So we have to use tools like gratitude to bring us back to center and to help us live a more peaceful and centered life. So those are just a few of things that are in the book, just different tools and techniques like that.
That's so great, Molly. I can't emphasize. I think the work you're doing is so important, and it's so wonderful. The book is who's your target audience? Is it for educators, parents, anyone?
Educators and parents, anyone who works with children. So whether that be a social worker, a parent, a daycare provider, anyone who has encounters with a child, not only does it teach you how to work with a child and teach them tools, but it also teaches you about those tools and how you can use them for yourself. A big part of the book, we talk about what's called the pause. We call it the pause, capital T, capital P, which is that time where you take to discern, right? Because that's what yoga does, is it teaches us to discern. And it tells us to stop and breathe in between the action that comes at us and our reaction. So it teaches the adults to do that through the words, and then through the examples, it teaches them how to teach it to kids. And there's no better way to hold adults accountable than when they teach kids.
So true. No, that's great. Go ahead, Sadie.
So I thought, some of the lessons that are being taught in the book, especially with the gratitude lessons, if we can sort of instill that from a young age, I think those habits get really infectious, right? Because that's how kids start thinking then. You start thinking on this more positive level or being thankful. And I think especially after a year like this, having those skills already ingrained in you is so important. So thank you again for inspiring this kind of change in the world.
Well, thank you. That means a lot. Thank you.
Molly, if someone wants to find you, where can they find you typically? Are you on social media?
So you can find us through all of our Challenge to Change platforms. So we are Challenge to Change, TO, challenge2changeinc.com, or on Facebook, we are Challenge to Change Inc. Same on Twitter. Well, actually on Twitter, I'm Moly Schreiber 1. But on Instagram as well, we're Challenge to Change Inc. So finding us anywhere. Otherwise, emailing us at grow, so GROW, grow at challenge2changeinc.com.
And what about your book? If they want to get a copy of your book, how do they do that?
So it's available on Amazon. It's also available through our website, Ingram Sparks. Right now we have a book giveaway set up on Goodreads and BookBub. So if you're interested in getting a free book giveaway, you can sign up on there as well. And you can access all of that through our website. So if you're interested in that, otherwise, Amazon's a great way to go as well.
Good old Amazon. Molly, so before we end, one question that we asked all of our guests to end the episode is, everyone we talk to is inspiring and busy in their own vocation. What is your guilty pleasure? We just like to play with our monk and hedonist title. So aside from your sugar-free wine.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Because you have a lot of monk in your life. You teach yoga, you do yoga, you have a lot of monk in your life.
Love Orange Theory. Love Orange Theory. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like totally corporate Orange Theory. Like no matter where you go in the United States, your workout is the same. Love that. Right. Love the loud music they play. Like running to some like AC/DC on the treadmill. Lifting some super heavy weights. Totally, yeah. That's a really good question because it's totally opposite of what I do. So, yeah, you got me there. That's my guilty pleasure.
That's a good one because I actually love running like once a week to really old school hip hop also. That's probably something that no one knows about me, but I love doing the same thing.
Do you have a Peloton treadmill?
No,
Okay, because
but
I'm like, we should.
those are awesome. I do them on the woodways though at the gym,
Okay.
which is very similar to a Peloton treadmill, and I use the Peloton interface to do that woodway workout.
Okay.
And I filter for hip hop music.
Not gonna lie, I may
I did.
not have done a hip hop workout on my treadmill for Peloton too.
Yeah, I do love the songs on the Peloton, the music, but I'll be honest, I got rid of mine because I've never used it.
Well, somebody else is using it now. It's serving somebody else, right?
Somebody else is using my Peloton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Molly, thank you so much for joining us today, and I really hope that this episode is going to inspire more people, more parents, more children.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Keep up the inspiring work, Molly. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bobby. Take care.